Have the government schools raise them instead, right?
Because I know they're great with managing money, at least. I mean, they got to be good at other things, too.
All the teachers in the public schools love Jesus and have great values, so I want my kids to be raised by them.
How badly could you possibly screw up kindergarten?
We're back here ready to talk about being dads, being husbands, and being business leaders who just want to thrive in all those areas, but we want to make sure that we focus on our wife, we focus on our family because they come first, and we can still kill it in business too. Today, we want to talk about the fact that everyone homeschools. What are your kids learning? We are on this journey and we're learning along the way, and we just got to figure this thing out.
Just a couple of years ago, I was between me and Ruthie, I was the one that thought homeschooling was ridiculous.
Like ridiculous.
Just the idea of having the kids around all the time, it was like it just seemed bizarre to me. Like, how are we going to do this? It just opened up a whole new set of problems that we didn't have when you send your kids off at 7 a.m. and they come home at 4:00. You know, you kind of have a little bit of your own space. You can have your own freedom and your own life. But what happened for us is Ruthie got just super excited about the idea of homeschooling. And then she got a hold of this lady named Rachel McCluskey. And it was all downhill from there.
Well, that name sounds familiar, huh?
Yeah. So we were on the 48 days cruise. And, you know, the cruise director guy was kind of annoying. When I had this issue with him, my suite wasn't large enough. So I had to go and tell him. Like, I didn't know who I am. Like, my name is Jamie Slingerland. I have dozens of followers on Instagram. My suite is super small.
That's where Jamie and I met for the first time. He was complaining to me.
That's where our bromance started. I can't remember. I did have some little hiccup and you helped. You're a great cruise director. Ruthie was thinking about homeschooling, and she had a lunch with Rachel McCluskey. And you guys all know Chris McCluskey. He's the fourth guy on the podcast. They've been homeschooling for 20 years. And Rachel is just really encouraging to Ruthie. The big thing that she shared is her and Chris, when they first started talking about homeschooling, you know, back in the day, horse and buggy days, because, you know, Chris is a lot older than us, that they made a list of all the things they wanted their children to learn. I don't think you'll be surprised, but most of those things on the list, schools don't even teach. What I gathered from that is that we are responsible to homeschool whether or not our kids go to school anyway. The things on that list, if they're that important, our kids need to learn them. Ruthie started the homeschool. She kind of pulled me in. I'm still less involved than she is, but that's how it all started.
I'm glad we're having this conversation today because I've been married for 4.5 years. And when I got married, I thought to myself, okay, I don't know what to do because I know I don't want to send my kids to school, but at least I have like 5 years. I'll be good. Like, that's way, way off in the future. Gunner's 3.5 now. And guess what? We got to decide what we're going to do pretty soon. So I'm actually really excited about this conversation, and I'm going to be learning from you guys today for sure.
Well, this is an important topic, man, because as Jamie, you just pointed out, and let's dive into this point number one here to help each other. And Michael, we were there with you. Like, some of the most important life lessons that you can teach Gunner and you can teach your kids are not taught in traditional schools. They just simply aren't. I mean, that's exactly what Rachel was downloading to Ruthie, is the fact that some of the most important things in life, a teacher is not going to teach your student, your child, in the sea of 30 other faces from the hours of 7 to 4 every day. So what is it that you want your kids to learn? If you're looking at Gunner's life 15, 20 years from now, what are some of those important life lessons you'd rather him learn?
Oh my gosh. So many. And they're not related to technical skills necessarily at this point. I mean, just today we took a bike ride and went to this place called Bagel J's in Buffalo, and we walked in there. I parked my bike outside, and me and Gunner went inside. He was just like the mayor of the store, talking to everybody. Hey, how you doing? I would like this, please. Oh, thank you so much. He went up to this group of guys who were talking, these 3 older men, and just said, hey, how's it going? What are you guys doing? Are you enjoying your bagels? Like, you just had all these conversations going on.
That.
And I'm like, okay, we're doing okay. Like, we're screwing a lot of things up, but he's learning how to interact with people, how to treat people well. And when I think about even all the people I work with coaching who are trying to improve their ability to sell or to be better business people, how to relate with people is one of those core skills that they need to succeed in business. So I'm like, okay, he's learning some of the things that are going to make him a successful adult right now.
That's good right there. Relating to people and various ages of people, right? I mean, right now in traditional school, you're stuck with your same age students, peers throughout the process. Yeah, you got one teacher, but you're one of 30 or 35 people. Gunner's in there, Mr. Mayor, talking to 60-year-olds and 6-year-olds if they walked in, right? But he's learning how to relate, and that's what you have to do. That's what you got to do in business. That's what you have to do in life. And you're modeling that for him already, Michael. So that's the point here is our kids are watching what we do every single day. Who do you want your kid to learn from more? An anonymous teacher or you?
Yeah, I get that. That's encouraging, but I got to be honest, like there's still like some fear of how do those technical skills transfer and set him up for a successful shot at college and the school that he wants to get into. So there's a lot of question marks, and it might be helpful just to talk about my parents' backgrounds and also my wife's parents' backgrounds too. My father has been in education for 43 years. He's lived and breathed education. And on the other side, Lydia's parents came from Egypt. And the opportunity to go to an American university was like, you have struck oil. Like, you have made it in life. I respect my in-laws so much. Lydia's father was an OB for 30 years, scratched and clawed his way just to get that opportunity to go to school in the U.S. He actually had to go through medical school again after going through it in Europe. Yeah, he went through it twice.
Crazy.
And so he like laid everything down just to have the shot to go to school and get the training he needed to set himself up for a good life, for a secure life for his family. So that whole idea is pretty deeply ingrained in Lydia, and that's what she was raised with. And there's a lot of value that came out of that. Mm-hmm. And I have this other education perspective too. So it's a big shift.
Hey, I'm with you there, man. We have this conversation in our household. And so we do, full disclosure, we've homeschooled from kindergarten onwards, but our background wouldn't suggest that would be the case. As an example, my wife, who is a primary teacher of our kids, she came from she's half Chinese. So her Chinese side of the family, very, very much into education. And so when her grandma came over here from China, it was like, everyone is going to be working hard, studying hard, and I want you to become attorneys. They all became attorneys. Wow. And I mean, then the next generation, so Alicia and her cousins, one of her aunts was just pushing hard, private, all these different schools along the way. One of the cousins who she's really close with, goes to Stanford, gets a Stanford degree, then goes on to Harvard, gets a Harvard MBA. I mean, that's what she's coming from. And so, both of my parents have their college degrees. They went on and got their teaching degrees as well. So we come from this place of like, oh yeah, you've got to get a degree, right? You've got to go to school. The traditional system's fine. It's going to produce things. But I think there's been a major paradigm shift, especially in the last decade or two, maybe, where people are starting to really think through, and especially the high cost of school too. Like, does it make sense to go and get a $200,000 or $300,000 in debt to jump into a $50,000 a year job right away?
Yeah. Well, I think EFM University would be a way better value for for our people.
Hey, there's an opportunity.
I mean, on this call, like we all have a lot of education. Like we've all went to college. I have 2 college degrees. Ruthie and I were both public school teachers. If 10 years ago you told me we'd be homeschooling, I would have laughed at you. This is an interesting conversation. Like, I think we would all admit we're not necessarily evangelists of this whole idea of homeschooling for everybody. It's kind of that out of the box kind of lifestyle, just like being an entrepreneur for us. Like the version of the story for me and Ruthie goes like this. We didn't plan on homeschooling until we had kind of broken ties with the 9-to-5 world ourselves. And then we kind of saw our children doing the same things that we were doing. You know, they leave on the bus at 9 a.m. on a Monday, and they come home in the late afternoon. And then there's all these activities for them to stay later if they want. As a former educator, we were kind of indoctrinated that it's better for the kids to be in school longer because that's where the real learning takes place. But it's a heavy topic, right? Because this is very counterculture here, this whole discussion. Me and Ruthie kind of walked away from that 9-to-5, and we were working from home. We wanted to go places and do things because we had that freedom. And then I think that's kind of where you're coming from, Michael, right? It's not all just, I don't want the schools to educate my children. Well, we could go to these other places and look what that would make possible.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, we're going to Houston to visit Lydia's parents. We couldn't go if our kids were in school because this is like the last week or last couple weeks of school and we couldn't miss. And not having that option, wow, that would be a big lifestyle change for us.
Yeah. We were in Mexico for almost a month in November. And I remember in the airport, somebody was asking me about like, what's going to happen with the kids not learning for that month? Just kind of like, oh my gosh, you gotta be joking me, right?
What's going to happen when we double our kids' learning?
Yes.
Because they're in Mexico learning the language and a new culture and a new place and learning how to interact with different people, seeing the world.
And they were like pulling out 100 peso bills out of their wallet and saying like, okay, how do you divide 100 by 18.5, Giovanni, so that we know like what the exchange is. So many
practical life stuff right there. International currency exchange. So, hey, before we get into, because I want to follow this point here, because point number 2 is really why we homeschool and what it's afforded us to do. Like your Mexico example is a great one. I want to back up and talk about someone who I've really followed on this topic of school and education is Seth Godin. And he's got so many great challenging points about school. And he has this quote. It says, the current educational structure, which seeks low-cost uniformity that meets minimum standards, is killing our economy, our culture, and us. And in his book, he has this ebook you can actually get online, Stop Stealing Dreams, which he talks about how kind of the framework of education steals dreams of kids, really. He talks just quickly about the idea of how school came into existence. It says the common school, now called a public school, was a brand new concept created shortly after the Civil War. Common because it was for everyone, for the kids of the farmer, the kids of the potter, and the kids of the local shopkeeper. Horace Mann is generally regarded as the father of this institution, but he didn't have to fight nearly as hard as you would imagine, because industrialists were on his side. The 2 biggest challenges of a newly industrial economy were finding enough compliant workers and finding enough eager customers. The common school solved both problems. So the normal school, now called a teacher's college, was developed to indoctrinate teachers into the system of a common school, ensuring that there would be a coherent approach to the processing of students. If this sounds parallel to the notion of factories producing items in bulk, of interchangeable parts, of the notion of measurement and quality, it's not an accident. That was a basis of schools 150 years ago, right? And so we're saying this is maybe why we don't do traditional school, and this is why we homeschool.
Can I ask some tough questions for you guys that are doing this?
Try.
Wow, yeah.
The thing-
They'll lack us.
And Lydia and I talk about this. We continue to be entrepreneurs and live the life that we live. But in one way or another, our wives, I don't know how you guys have it set up exactly, but they take probably the majority of the weight when it comes to spending time with the kids still, right? Because we're running businesses. Maybe so for Jamie. What about this dynamic of never having time to yourself, like from the woman's perspective, the wife's perspective? Like, is that like a heavy weight, and how do you overcome that? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's one that every couple has to tackle, and you don't tackle it once. Sometimes you tackle it once a month, because they do need that space, and we go back and forth on this. I mean, they're being very frank. There are times when things have gotten tough, and one of the students who happens to be a child of ours is just tough, and you sometimes you butt heads as a teacher and student, mom and son. And that can be a challenge. And there's many times we've said, okay, we're about ready to throw in the towel. And it's trying to get on the same page of saying, where can we and how can I help, as the stay-at-home dad entrepreneur, but I'm mostly here as the entrepreneur. How can I help give you some breaks throughout the week? Like even just this morning, we had a friend who decided she was going to pop in for tea, right? And I just found out about it, right before it happened, and I was like, "Well, do you want me to take the kids? And I'll just take them to a coffee shop for a while together." And she's like, "That'd be great." So there's times when you just have to do that. You have to find how to get on the same page of, do you need this like on a regular schedule? Like, hey, every Tuesday morning, you just get some girl time. Go get a mani-pedi, go get a, whatever. I mean, Jamie, what does that look like for you and Ruthie? You do things a little differently?
Yeah, Michael, and you'll notice that when you asked that question, I sat back in my chair as far away from the microphone as I could. We're signing up for a whole different game here as EFM guys. We got that marriage piece, the family piece. It is a completely different dynamic. I think every couple has to find out what works for them. The issue that me and Ruthie have is we don't just want to find activities to keep our kids busy. And I think maybe there's a little bit of guilt that we have for sending our kids to kindergarten and first grade, because our kids came home really like kind of beat down from kindergarten and first grade. Like Diego came home from preschool at Olmsted in Buffalo with homework, and he was in pre-K. I didn't really answer your question, except this is not for the faint of heart. I'm not a person that thinks that it's the woman's responsibility to do all the homeschool. Like we don't even put the same amount of importance on the standard curriculum as most people do. I think that, like the kids should be out in the shop working with the dad, and the dad should take the kids and like go do some stuff. Or, my kids do gymnastics for a whole afternoon, and I take them there. I get a whole bunch of work done. Ruthie needs her time alone, just like anybody else does. But let's not lie to ourselves. Like if Lydia signs up for homeschool, there's going to be some issues with her schedule, obviously.
But in comparison to, all right, I'm in the season of life, and I don't want to make this a coaching call about me, but I'm just really curious, and I think a lot of other people are who have young kids. Compare where you're at now in life versus a full-time mom with toddlers. Like, because of those activities and the schooling that happens, where is it? Does it get better? Does it get a little easier? Or is it just kind of the same?
We need to have our wives on for this talk to involve them. I think it gets easier because in the sense that we don't believe that we have to hold our kids' hands for everything for homeschool. So 3 hours of homeschool doesn't mean that we're sitting over their shoulder, like breathing down their neck. Like they need to learn to be autonomous individuals and do work on their own. It's going to take a level of leadership for you guys, Michael, to find your own path. But it's like you got to start thinking outside of the box to do things completely different. Like what works for one family will not work for the McGreevy's.
Yeah. And there's, we're kind of straddling between both of you right now because we have couple of toddlers, that Alicia has to handle during the day while she's teaching other kids.
Yeah.
And so it's a balance, but there are, like Jamie just talked about, there are definitely topics or curriculum or subjects that they can be a little more autonomous on. So she can set them up with, okay, here's some math I want you to do. Here's some handwriting I want you to do. Because we do some of that core curriculum stuff. I mean, they're just starting out. They're just learning. So we don't want them to be 12 and not know how to write their name or add 2 + 2, right? So we're going to do some of that stuff. They can do that by themselves while she gets a little maybe playtime with the toddler, or heck, she gets them going and gets her shower in, or whatever it looks like during the day. But there's also a lot of different methods and models of homeschooling too. Like we've tested out this year, we've tested out a kind of a hybrid model, a charter school. So our homeschooling is technically connected to a charter school. And on Monday and Friday, our kids can choose from electives like the arts, music. Our kids are like in a coding class for kids, Lego robotics, art, pottery, things like that, where that's a great time because then Alicia can drop them off. They get some time with several grade ages of kids in one class, and she can go do a coffee date or lunch with the girls or things like that. So there's different ways to do it. And next year we're looking at this like online model where the boys will be doing a lot of their classes online totally. So we'll get back to you.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think it's just to hear those different examples and the different ways you're approaching it is really, really helpful to hear. Appreciate that.
And Jamie, I mean, get back to your story there too on the why, right? So this point number 2 of why we homeschool is that it has given us, I mean, we've seen it firsthand with your family, how you have the flexibility and the freedom to travel the world. They can be stuck in a Spanish class in a school, or you could take them to Mexico for 2 months and they're in a Spanish immersion class. Which one are they going to be learning from most?
Exactly. I mean, that's the biggest benefit, right? You can be reading about things or you can be doing them. I mean, even I was looking at Michael's Instagram post. I don't know if it was yesterday, but Michael, weren't you in like Niagara Falls with Gunnar at some point?
Niagara River, overlooking the Lake Erie Basin marina there.
Yeah, Chris, we've had this conversation before that we want to make the whole world a school to our kids. Like I took Diego to Cuba. I mean, it's just so much more than this idea that most of the jobs that our kids are gonna have in the next generation haven't even been invented yet. I want my kids to learn how to think outside the box and have that creativity piece. And I'm not feeling like I got that in I can only speak from personal experience, but public school didn't do that for me.
Well, I think we can all probably agree that most kids, most people learn by experiencing something. And what greater way to experience something by going to a place and doing that, getting hands-on experience. I mean, Jamie, you and I, we both world school, we travel a lot with our families, and I guarantee you my little 5 and 7-year-old or 6 and 8-year-old now, whatever they are, can tell you a lot more about Greece and Greek culture and Greek history because we took them on a trip to Greece for 3 weeks last fall. And, when we brought some CDs about Greek culture and some of the mystery there, and they can tell you stories because it's like, wow, here they are in Athens or here they are in Crete, and learning about some of the history and the Greek mythology that gives them context. And they're looking out at the ocean that they're talking about. But there's so many opportunities like that to just pick up and go, let's go try this out. In 2 years, 2020, Alicia and I have these plans. We've talked about them for years now, but it's getting a lot closer. 2020, we're taking a long sabbatical and traveling the world with our family. So the 6 of us are going to go on this like probably 3 to 6 month round the world trip and going to hit every continent and just try to go deep while we're in certain places and see what we can learn. And man, I'm so excited about that for my kids to see how they're going to experience the world and how they're going to experience learning in a different way.
Yeah, Chris, I have so many thoughts running through my head hearing you talk about that 3 to 6 month trip. First of all, it's like you better start saving because that's going to cost some money. And then the next thing is I'm going to be jealous, man. My business just isn't set up where I can leave more than a month at a time, and freedom is one of my top values.
I don't know if mine is either, but we're going to do it. We'll see.
But I taught middle and high school Spanish for years, and I meet people all the time that don't know how to say anything in Spanish at all, except like, hola, ¿cómo estás? Like they've studied for years between middle school, high school. I just think just this opportunity, like people get to go to a Latin American country for a couple of weeks, and they'll know and retain so much more than you do with years of schooling. So I'm just thinking about your family going on that trip, and you are going to create so many memories as a family, which is a whole nother subject. But your kids are just like little sponges sucking in this world culture, all these accents that they hear. I learned about geography from studying maps, and your kids are going to be like, what country are we in today, Daddy? That is amazing.
Yeah. That is incredible. And it's easy to write that stuff off because we're just so in this groove. Like I've been in such this groove that like the place you learn or learning should be painful, or learning should be like a sacrifice rather than this amazing adventure. It's so funny. You think about the idea of a field trip. This is the thing I look forward to the most when I was a kid or in school, because we get to go outside and learn something. Oh my gosh. Why would we feel that way if we were learning a lot inside?
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? Jamie, we've talked about that, how like we kind of consider our home as like the headquarters, but like everything we do outside of the home is like, those are the field trips. Those are the crazy fun field trips we get to take.
Yeah. And again, I don't think everybody listening has the exact same desire to do the travel and to the extent that the three of us want to do. But I remember when I first joined Dan's mastermind, Michael, remember Chris McCluskey was gone for 4 weeks. He was in Europe with his family, something like that, a month or whatever. But he was posting all these pictures of them in Irish gardens, and they went to Rome and all these other places. And I thought, someday I'm going to do that with my family. We're going to go to these places, and we're doing it. And that's just what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Chris, you got a huge smile on your face. What do you think?
You just said what you said like an episode or two ago. You talked about the someday I'll. You said someday I'll. You're already doing it, Jamie. Like you thought that was a dream a couple of years back, and then you took action steps. So good job, man.
Last year, like 2 years ago, we went through that book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, talking all about upper limit challenges. And Michael, you're going to laugh because I'm a 7 like you. My upper limit challenges are usually not income. It's more experiential. Going to Mexico for almost a month was something that I had told myself when I was 21 years old as a student, that someday, wouldn't it be amazing? I didn't even say someday I said someday, wouldn't it be amazing if I could take my family and do one of these study abroad programs. But what we did in Mexico was almost the same experience that I did as an undergraduate in college, and I got to take my whole family along. And I think we've only started scratching the surface on this. So, I mean, for me in this discussion, I'm not like the evangelist for homeschooling for everybody. But for me, the things in my heart that I wanted to do, they just don't work for having my kids in public school all the time. And then there's just a whole bunch of other benefits that we've sort of discovered along the way.
Have you guys heard that stat too, that like 80% of the time we spend with our kids is all before they turn 18. So once they're 18, the rest of our lives, the rest of their lives, we barely get to spend with them. So like, why not when they're under your roof and when they're sponges for learning and sponges for the world around them? Try to do what you can. Even in our marriages, we've talked about how we want to still set them up for whatever it is they want to do, right? If our kids want to go to college, we want to make sure that the homeschooling, the world schooling, the whatever we're doing, whatever that looks like, is going to set them up to get to a school if they want to. Secretly, I'm hoping mine don't. But, you know, if they want to get ready for school.
My kids are going to do like online university when they're traveling around the world. Like the professor probably won't even know where they're at if they're doing it online, you know?
What do you want your kids to be homeless or something? You don't want them to go to college? You serious? That's the ticket to the American dream.
Well, that's another benefit of homeschool. It's like the McCluskey kids, a lot of them are doing online university as high school students.
So I want to bring up point number 3 here. And this is one that everyone listening can identify with, is the fact that at least from, say, 3 p.m. until bedtime, we are all homeschooling. It's true. I mean, if you have kids in traditional school and they're home, what are you doing with that time? As we talked about earlier, and Michael and I were trying to answer some questions about what we want our kids to learn. What are we teaching them from 3 until bedtime every day? What do you guys think about that?
Oh my gosh. I am constantly trying to help Gunnar, or trying to prepare him to be a great adult. I learned that from Andy Andrews. Jamie shared that with me. But training him up so he becomes an extraordinary adult. I'm always thinking that, like, how can I have a conversation with him after he just acted out, or after he just stole something from his sister, or after he just got really mad and threw something? Like, how can I have a conversation that can prepare him to be a successful adult? And I think about that all the time. I think I've created a monster, though, because now he thinks he's an adult already, and he's only 3.
Hey, he's going to be mayor someday.
That's right.
One thing I want my kids to learn as well is to take risks. Like in school, you're not really taught to take risks and fail, right? Because if you take a risk, you're going to fail sometimes. That doesn't go very well with the minimum standards and standardized testing, does it? So like, as entrepreneurs and this spirit that we live in, like, you want to try to find a problem, solve it, create an idea of a business around it. And sometimes that's going to work and sometimes it's not. So what can we be doing to teach them, like, hey, how could you look at this thing differently? Is that an opportunity? That's just another idea that they can practically do that after those school hours if your kids are still in school, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And I just want my kids to have a meaningful, purposeful life that really serves God and is in line with who they truly were made to be. And I can't connect learning how to sit still and be quiet and listen and obey to being one of those world changers and someone who does something meaningful to, like, make the world a better place. I just don't think those two philosophies are compatible.
That's good, Michael. So you don't want someone who can just stand in line really well, or be a good line leader?
Oh gosh, I'm sure there's a place for that at some point, but not most of the time. If that's how you go through your whole day, like in a line and knowing how to be quiet, knowing how to conform, can't get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, another thing I think of when Seth Godin talks about that particular point, he talks about how if we're in this globalization in this world now, we are not going to out-obedience other countries. So let's just face the fact. China, India, Indonesia, all these places that just produce really good workers for a fraction of the cost, that's a workforce. And so if you can create a child who can look at the world, find a problem, and solve it creatively, you're going to have people. They are going to have people to work for them, right? There's going to be plenty of great people that can stand in line, and let's not be the ones that are raising those kids.
Oh man! But who's going to do all the work then? If we're turning everybody into these leaders and world changers, who's going to do the heavy lifting? I have that discussion pretty often. And I just say, not my kids. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of mean to say, but I don't know. I think there's a season for that. I was a laborer a good part of my life, and I learned a lot through that. And I think everyone should know what that's like, to feel like what it's like to work physically hard and to have to follow directions and to have to submit to authority. I think those are all important things. But as your destination in life, as your mark on the world, no.
Yeah, that's good. So, hey, as we get ready for the McCluskey mentor moment here, Chris, we wanted to ask, can you share with us what parents need to teach their kids that they most likely won't get in a traditional system? Oh, and by the way, how long were you with your family traveling Europe?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was a month. That was the first trip, but yes, we went for a month. We flew into Dublin, and so we spent a week in Ireland. McCluskey, that's a good Irish name, right? So we had to go back and discover some of the Irish roots there, but then flew from there into Rome. And so we spent a week in Italy, a goodly bit of it in Rome, but then we trotted up to Assisi and actually stayed, like a couple blocks down the road from St. Francis's house, okay? We rented a Verbo house in each place that we went. We just want to live in those communities. So literally one of those, houses, not in the wall, you're in the row houses that go up those winding streets. And just, oh my gosh, magical experiences there. But we went from there then to Paris and stayed a week in France in this little tiny town not too far from Fontainebleau, near the palace that Napoleon and so many of the other leaders have stayed in through the years. And then went from there to London and trotted around the Cotswolds and had quite a time. Now that was just the one, right? You guys, the world becomes your classroom when you are portable with your business and when the kids can be portable with their ongoing education. Then come on, bring it. The whole world is the classroom, so to speak.
Love that. Chris, we talked a lot about this idea of world schooling and homeschooling. Can you just share your thoughts on this, and what is it that parents truly need to teach their kids that frankly they're not getting in a traditional school system?
Yeah, it's a great question. Your discussion here has really fed that. I love the statement one of you made, I forget who it was, that really everyone homeschools or needs to be homeschooling. That doesn't mean that everybody is literally homeschooling, but so much of the shaping, the education of our children and their sense of self and their place in the world and all has to take place in the home from mom and dad, even if the children then do their reading, writing, and arithmetic, so to speak, at a public school, at a parochial school, or charter school, classical school, wherever else they may go for that. It is basically, to me, inconceivable that a child with loving, invested parents could possibly have their kid get to adulthood and not know how to read and write and do basic math. It's going to happen. It's not going to be hard to have that happen. The far more difficult things to inculcate into a child are the things of love. And I don't mean acting loving. I mean, first of all, knowing what it is to be immersed in, to be experiencing on a daily basis, being loved. So that you can then, from that experience of knowing what it is to be loved, learn to love others. And the same issues apply to any aspect of your character development. Your faith in the God of your family. Yes, it is right for families to shape their children's theology, not to just say that should be up to the child to somehow adopt from the culture or something. Their views of themselves, and increasingly, as they grow up, moving beyond what we call parallel play, where they're kind of playing beside their friends, but they're not really interacting yet into the older years of education, where they start to do a whole lot more sharing and swapping of ideas, and the peer group becomes more and more important. How are they learning to interact with others? How are their relationship skills being stretched? And here I don't even mean just with peers their own age. One of the things that happens in most schools anyway is that we're age tracked. You spend most of your days, 5 days a week, with people who are within 1 year of the year that you were born. Well, guess what? That's not life. That's not real. But when you get in those settings and you begin to kind of listen to the chatter in the hallways and the locker rooms, there's a lot of idolizing of kids who are just a little bit older. Oh, they're so cool. Oh, I want to be like them. Hey, that can be real dangerous. And there's also a character development that you begin to see in the kids that says that those who are a couple years younger, oh, they're nerds. Oh, man, we don't want to be with you. Go away, baby. We don't want you with us. They're learning relationship skills that are sick. They're unhealthy. They're not good for culture. When you are, as a family man, investing in your children learning relationship skills in the context of all relationships, then they learn how to love and look out for and care for and include those who are younger. And they learn how to interact with and look them in the eye and give a firm handshake and have intelligent conversation to those who are older. Those are the things that can only be taught in the family. And that's where, again, I love that phrase that really everyone needs to be homeschooling, whether you're literally homeschooling or not.
So McCluskey, do you have a good resource you could point us to that maybe even you and Rachel leaned into, this idea of schooling and the schooling system?
How amazing that you should ask a question like that, Niemeyer. Actually, I do. Yeah, Rachel and I wrote a chapter for a very popular book called The Complete Parenting Book. And we wrote a chapter on choosing a schooling approach. And we took a very even-handed approach, I feel like, to whatever the educational piece was for reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we addressed some of these other topics that I've been touching on here with regard to your character development and all. So, yeah, we're going to make that available. I've got access to that. So we will have that available as a PDF download from the website, right?
EFMlife.com.
Chris, thanks for that. We're all learning from you because you've been doing homeschool a lot longer than us. So thanks for all your wisdom. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm just thankful that we can learn from somebody who's been there, done that, been through it for how many years now? 20 years. We're just grateful you're here, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, thank you, man. That was awesome. And just to leave, we want to ask you, make a list of things that you want your kids to know, really, really know by the time they're 18, about themselves, about life, about things that a traditional school may or may not be addressing. Start teaching them now. It may not be homeschool for you, and that's okay. But when they come home from school, they're going to be homeschooled by you. So what is that going to look like? Identify your values and start pouring it into them.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit EFMlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.